Canadian football is a magic show, a century-old spectacle, grown men battling to cross a line drawn in the dirt. It is a game filled with heroes, great players and great teams, bringing championship pride to their faithful fans. The field is a battleground where skill and determination are the tools of the trade. It is a game that has grabbed a nation by the heart. An annual struggle becomes an epic battle as teams fight for the ultimate glory, the chance to hold the Grey Cup and become forever known as a champion. For more than a century, Winnipeg has been a home to Canadian football. While teams may have presented an air of sophistication, the early days of football in Manitoba were known more for bone-crunching collisions on prairie fields, and the stars of the day were both athletes and brawlers. Winnipeg won the West's first Grey Cup in 1935 when they marched into Hamilton and defeated the powerful Hamilton Tigers, with the incredible Fritzie Hansen, the West's first superstar, leading the charge. In 1950, the Bombers challenged the Argonauts at Toronto's Varsity Stadium in a Grey Cup game forever known as the Mud Bowl.
The Mud Bowl game was one of the great disasters in the CFL. What happened, of course, is that we had a sudden snowstorm on the night before the game, and then it started to melt. And what we ended up with was slush. It was the most deplorable conditions that you can ever think of. So bad that one of the Winnipeg players, Buddy Tinsley, he fell down face down in the water, and the referee, Heck Crichton, turned him over, or poor old Tinsley might have drowned. But in any event, Winnipeg had Indian Jack Jacobs, and we thought they had a great passing attack. We never found out because they couldn't throw the ball, and the Argos were able to win it.
Although he never brought the Bombers a Grey Cup, Indian Jack Jacobs' spectacular passing made him a fan favorite. In 1953, Jacobs had a new target, an all-star from the NFL's Philadelphia Eagles, Harry Bud Grant.
I arrived in Winnipeg as a player in 1953, and I remember going to the first practice, and we went out to Assiniboine Park to practice because our practice field was wet or underwater or something. And I got out there, and I never saw so many people. We had a hard time practicing because there were so many people there to watch practice.
There was never a question as to the Bombers' popularity. Football was practically a way of life, especially if your father was the legendary voice of the Bombers, Cactus Jack Wells.
As a kid growing up in Winnipeg, everybody was a Blue Bomber fan, and when your father was the voice of the Blue Bombers, you were an even bigger fan. But living in Winnipeg and growing up with a father who was the voice of the football team, it was pretty easy to be absolutely taken by what went on.
In Winnipeg, the Bombers were always front-page news. In 1957, the top story was 29-year-old Bud Grant's transition from player to head coach.
In his time, Bud Grant was the greatest student of the game of Canadian football that there was. And I mean, it proved that with the success he had, knowing what it took to create a win.
Grant promptly installed a bold new offense known as the Wing T and recruited the perfect quarterback to run it, University of Iowa star Kenny Payne.
I had the opportunity to come here because of what Bud Grant, as a new coach, wanted as an offense, and he felt I would fit as a offensive quarterback. And actually, the Canadian football game was made for this particular offense.
I figured that the Wing T, as we called it at that time, was the way to be successful up here. Well, Payne, of course, was the best at it that there was.
I can remember the first play I called. I ran for about 12, 13 yards for a first down, and the stadium went crazy. I guess they had never seen a running quarterback in this league on Winnipeg's team anyway.
Quarterbacks make headlines because linemen make blocks. In 1958, Grant signed another wing T specialist from the University of Iowa, future Hall of Famer Frank Rigney.
He was probably the perfect individual to fit in with the Canadian boys because he could move, run with them, do everything you needed to do in the wing T offense.
I really, really loved football and wanted to know and understand every play. And I wanted to understand it from every position of the offensive players. I knew exactly what the quarterback was trying to do, what the receivers were trying to do, and it helped me do my job against people who are sometimes quite difficult to block.
In the late 1950s, Bud Grant and the Winnipeg Blue Bombers enjoyed the luxury of two equally talented quarterbacks, Kenny Payne and Jim Van Pelt.
Jim Van Pelt and Kenny Payne shared the quarterbacking duties for the Blue Bombers. When they weren't quarterbacking the team, they could also play other positions. The two quarterback system could drive a lot of teams crazy because you could send both of them out onto the field and you never really knew which one was going to be the quarterback.
In the mid-50s, a tip from a writer who heard it from a railroad porter brought the Bombers a running back from Lincoln College in Missouri, the great Leo Lewis.
Leo Lewis is the greatest player I ever had. The greatest player, no question about it. He could do everything. He had instincts of a natural football player. He could block, he could run, he could catch. He played every minute of every down of every game. He was, without a doubt, in my mind, the best player I've ever been associated with on a football field.
In 1958, with Van Pelt at quarterback and Payne at defensive halfback, Bud Grant's wing T offense paid off, and Winnipeg celebrated a thrilling 35-28 Grey Cup win over Hamilton.
If you ask me what was the greatest thrill I've had in sports or athletics, winning that Grey Cup in Vancouver probably is the ultimate in terms of what it meant to me, because it justified everything I'd done, and I'd been here and coaching and playing and whatnot, and now I feel I was somewhat fulfilled. Probably gave me as much satisfaction as anything I've ever done in sports.
We had the biggest homecoming I think a team has ever had. It was sub-zero temperatures. People were lined up on the street from the airport all the way over to the arena.
Nobody cared when we had our parade and it was 30 below zero, and you couldn't drink out of the Grey Cup because your lips would be frozen to it. But the town turned out, there was thousands and tens of thousands of people lining Portage Avenue to welcome us back.
5 times in 6 years, the Bombers met the Hamilton Tiger Cats in the Grey Cup final. The Bombers won 4. But none more dramatic than in 1961, when quarterback Kenny Payne twisted his way into the end zone to record the first overtime win in Grey Cup history.
Kenny Payne knew how to win football games. He knew what to do, and I think that he and Coach Grant meshed immensely well in preparing offensively to play other teams.